o'clock in the morning. I haven't slept that night, and really haven't really slept for like probably the last 3 weeks. So I had just bought a business as a fundless sponsor, a term which didn't even exist back then, and it wasn't going well. It wasn't going well at all. It was this label printing company, and it was kind of sputtering a bit, and then the recession came and just flattened the business. So we were teetering on going out of business, and then in a diving save, I had found this strategic buyer who was going to buy the business and keep it afloat. That was the good news. The bad news was we were going to have to lay off about 25% of the workforce. The reason I was up and wasn't able to sleep is I was going to do that in a couple hours. So I'm reviewing the spreadsheet, looking over the numbers, the final numbers, just seeing like if we could get more severance and how we could make this a little bit of a softer landing. I had this copy of this book, true story. It's called The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale. And I read this book, like a few pages of this book every night, because I would get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and not be able to sleep, and I'd try to like coax myself that it was gonna turn out okay. So at 6 a.m., I walk into the plant. It's January in Fort Wayne. It's kind of like last night here, which is kind of nasty. And I walk in, the whole place smells like ink because it was a label printing business, and the CFO, her name, we'll call her Dana, she and I were the only two people that knew what was going on. So I kind of make eye contact with her, and then we go through what we had practiced, hundreds of times, which is we brought the people into the conference room that we were going to let go. And I had these remarks prepared. Again, I'm 29 at the time, nervous as hell. And I start preparing, into my speech. I thank everyone for their work, and I tell them we tried as hard as we could, and I list out all the effort we did, and I said, unfortunately, today's gonna be your last day. And I had the next part of my speech, which was talking about the severance we were gonna make for them, COBRA, the normal stuff like that. But before I got into that, Dana, who had been holding all of this in for like 2 months at this point, just broke down in tears. And as did a whole bunch of other people that were sitting in the conference room, including most of the people there. So a couple people got really angry, and then I kind of finished the rest of the thing talking about outplacement services and that we had, and some employers that were hiring that they could talk to, and severance we were able to get for them. And most people just kind of put their head down, walked out of the room. And so just the rest of the day was kind of handling logistics, and my colleague was having a similar layoff in another plant that we had in another location. A couple hours later, there's a lot of noise, and door comes open, and I'm in this other room, and there's just all this shouting and yelling, and not really sure what's going on. Turns out one of the terminated employees comes back, and he's really upset, and he's screaming and stuff. He has a loaded gun. And anyway, we don't call the police. We just talk to him and remind him of his wife and young son, and that goes away. We diffuse the situation without incident. So that was obviously one of the hardest days that I've had as an entrepreneur, but not the only one. You may have a day like that. I hope you don't. But you also may have days that look maybe not as extreme, but pretty tough. You may have one of your top employees come in and hand you her resignation just without notice. You may lose a large customer, which you're wondering how you're ever going to replace that revenue. You will miss revenue projections. You will miss bank projections. You will have bank default. You will probably be in default at some point on your bank line. You'll have software systems that don't work, bring your customers down. You'll have cybersecurity attacks. You may have an ERP system implementation that brings you to your knees. And you may have to fire someone that you've known for a long time. You may have a lawsuit that will not only drain your cash, but will drain all of your emotional energy. So Brian told me to make some inspirational remarks today. How am I doing? I feel like I'm nailing it. Yeah. Well, the reason I tell you that story is that day in Fort Wayne, Indiana, was really a huge turning point in my life. It was maybe the turning point in my life. And I had 4 realizations that day. And I want to share these with you, whether you're an investor or whether you're thinking about going into it. These were things that I took away. Number 1 is, when you buy a business, you're not an investor, you're a leader. And I think my identity changed that day when I was in that conference room. And I'm glad that I went and did that myself, because I wasn't able to hide behind a spreadsheet. When you own a business, you're accountable. And so I encourage all of you to change your identity from, I'm the person who provides the capital. No, there's people's lives that are depending on you. The second realization that I had was, when I was on Wall Street, prior to starting my journey in entrepreneurship, we would build these models, and the models would have company A buying company B. And there was always a line in that model that said cost synergies. And obviously there's cost synergies when company A buys company B a lot of time. Well, guess what? That day in Fort Wayne, Indiana, I realized cost synergies was a man who had to go home and tell his wife and young son that he no longer had a job. Or cost synergies was a woman who just walked out, didn't say anything, but had to wonder, how she was going to put food on the table or make rent. Which brings me to my third point, which is I resolved that I was never going to be a part of cost synergies again. I was going to devote my life to building companies. There's a lot of ways to make money in this world, and there's lots of ways you can cut costs on that, but that wasn't going to be something I was ever going to do again. I was going to devote my life to building companies, creating jobs, and as you heard in my intro, really build businesses through people. So that was a huge turning point for me. The fourth thing I realized that day was I was not a very good leader. Notwithstanding what I may have thought previously, I had a hard look in the mirror that day, and it's like, Graham, you're not very good at this. And so for the last 24 years, I've devoted myself to trying to become the best leader that I could. I've had an executive coach I've talked to every week for 15 years. I've consumed thousands and thousands of hours of content on the topic. I've listened to podcasts. I've had all kinds of coaches, taken courses. And then I've tried to also convey that content. So I teach, as was mentioned, I teach two classes at Stanford Business School, write a blog, and try to really become a student of leadership over that time. And that would be something I would also encourage all of you, because you are, like I said, everyone in this room, you are going to be a leader. So in the 26 years since I've been an entrepreneur and going through all that journey and all that learning, I wanted to share with you the 3 most important things that I learned that I think would be relevant for most people in this room. And then, Brian, we can talk about others as well, but these are the three takeaways. The first one I have is that, you got to do the thing that turns you on. And that sounds really obvious, but I see so many people who don't do this. I graduated, and I had already started buying companies in my dorm room in Stanford Business School, and so I had this energy and this passion for what I wanted to do. But what I did instead, what maybe some of you do, is I made this expected value matrix. This is the risk-adjusted probability of all these different things. And I went to what was the, quote, safe job. And let me tell you quickly about the safe job. The safe job, it turns out, isn't what you think. The safe job, I reported to someone who kind of didn't really want me to succeed. I reported to someone who told me where to be, what kind of deals to bid on, what hours I could work, what I should wear, what planes I had to get on. And if I had had kids at that time, I would have still, even though I was doing the safe job and the thing I wasn't that excited about, I still would have missed Little League practices and been home late for dinner. So probably the truest thing I'm going to tell you today is something Buddha figured out 2,800 years ago, which is there's going to be suffering. No matter what you choose to do in this life, you're going to have suffering. It's why it stood the test of 2,800 years, because it's just true. But, so life is suffering. My slides don't seem to be clicking here. There we go. So life is suffering, so choose something worth suffering for. Leadership is worth suffering for, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. The other thing about this expected value matrix that I was describing is it's just totally wrong. Your math is way off. And the reason is you're not factoring in what you're going to be like when you're at full power. When I worked in that safe job, part of me died. and the way that I showed up in that role versus how I showed up for the last 24 years, there's just no comparison. You will show up with superpowers when you're doing something you're excited about. And the reason for that is stress doesn't come from hard work. Stress comes from friction and tension. And when you're spending 8 hours a week doing something that you really aren't excited about or maybe isn't even part of your value system, like that is stressful. So you will show up very differently. One question, of course, is what am I excited about? How do I figure that out? And so the best exercise that I've done with my students, and we'll do it really quickly, it'll take 1 minute, is imagine that a magical genie came out of a lamp. And the genie said, I'm not an all-powerful genie, so I can't give you any wish. But what I can give you is that whatever you throw yourself into with your life and your career, it's going to work out great. It's going to work out great. I'm going to grant you that wish. It's going to take longer than you think. It's going to be harder than you think. You're going to have ups and downs. But what would you wish for if you truly had that? And I would argue that's what you should be doing with your life. So principle one is principle one is do the thing that you're excited about. The second principle I have of my three is lengthen your time frame. This is something I see so many people make the mistake on. I don't know why, but we just sold this thing that everything's supposed to come quickly. And if it's not coming quickly, somehow we're failing or we're behind. Or look at what this other person's doing and they're ahead of me and I must be the wrong person. Or gosh, if I only would have started earlier. Or I can't start now because I don't, because I wasted this time or whatever. But just chill out. I've cashed out, I calculated this the other day. I've cashed out over 500 entrepreneurs over the course of my career. So I've written a check and watched, and in those 500 data points, I've seen people start businesses, grow businesses, and ultimately get them to a point where they're ready to sell. 500 times. 0 of those people did it quickly. 0. And even when it looked quick, it took only 7 years from the day they started the company, behind that was the 20 years of them building themselves and becoming the person that could do that in 7 years. So this does not happen quickly. The thing that also happens, if this is for some of you who are maybe our students right now, is the people who will come to recruit on campus largely are going to be rewarding your individual contributor skills. You're going to get paid. So if you optimize for the first 2 years out of school, you're going to be optimizing for stuff you're kind of already good at. Investment banking, consulting, that sort of thing. Because that's what they can pay you the most to do. Entrepreneurship, sorry to tell you this, you're going to not be good at it. You might suck at it, but you have a long time to get good at it, which is why you're not going to get paid that much in the early days. I had a friend, when I graduated, one of my really good friends, he went to a rival school, and he became a convertible bond salesperson. It's great, and he optimized for that 1 year. Well, 24 years later, he knows how to short stocks, buy bonds, buy stocks, short bonds, and he can run a mean black Scholes. But let me tell you about 25 years in entrepreneurship, what you can learn. You can learn how to rally the troops when your business has had the worst quarter it's ever seen. You're going to learn how to hold people accountable, create plans, have difficult conversations. You're going to learn to create new product lines, create new services. You're going to learn how to hire and get people to join your cause and follow you. And you're going to unfortunately have to learn how to fire. You're going to raise capital. You're going to raise your employees' self-esteem. You're going to learn how to sell as though your life depends on it, because it does. You're going to sell employees when you really don't have money to pay them, and they're going to have to get excited about your vision. You're going to have to sell investors when you have no track record. They're going to have to sell customers when your new product that you really want to introduce isn't even ready, and they have to buy this one now so you have enough cash to keep going. But mostly you're going to have to sell yourself every morning, because you can't really see always the exact path, and you're going to have to sell yourself that just taking a step forward is going to get you there. But one of the biggest things I've learned in 25 years, if I had to summarize, is you're going to learn how to be able to use your imagination to envision a world that doesn't exist yet. I spend a tremendous amount of my time doing this, using your imagination to see the world as you want it to be first in your mind, and then bring that into reality through a group of people and through a group of employees. So that's what you can get in 25 years as a leader or an entrepreneur. Your goal is not to maximize your first year earnings out of school. Your goal is to maximize who you get to become as a result of the journey of your career. So extend your time frame and give yourself the benefit of having a lifelong love affair with your life and your career. Principle 2. Principle 3 is, my third and last principle is, beware of the two most dangerous words in entrepreneurship. Beware of the two, forgot my slides. So do the thing that turns you on, and lengthen your time frame, are the first two. So principle 3 is beware of the two most dangerous words of entrepreneurship. So I have been a lecturer or a case guest at Stanford for over 20 years now. And my favorite exercise to do with students is the one I just did with you, some version of what would you do if you knew you would not fail? We, in my classes, we actually spend an entire quarter really helping students get really clear on that. What is that thing you would do if you knew you wouldn't fail? Because that's, again, what I think you should do. So they get clear on it a lot of times. And in 20 years, no student has ever come up to me once and said, hey, Graham, you know what? I just give up. I'm not going to do this. I know exactly what I would do that I'm excited about, but nah, not going to do it. No student's ever said that to me. Instead, they say the two most dangerous words, which are not now. Not now. I'm going to do it. Not now. First, I gotta. And so give you another example of another classmate of mine. I'll change his name, call him Tim. So Tim and I graduated around the same time. At the same time I took my journey to entrepreneurship, Tim took the safe job. We have coffee one day. Graham, I hate this job. I'm out of here. My bonus comes in January. I'm out. A year later, got this another equity that's going to vest in December. Graham, freaking hate this job. I'm out of here. A year later, you know what, I'm getting married this year. And I'm just going to keep it chill, 2 years later, our first kid, 3 years later, private school, number of years later, a mortgage, number of years later, a new vest of equity, 24 years later, still there. And it's sad. It's really sad because I know right now that if he could go back in time, he would have just taken the leap. The thing about entrepreneurship really is that the path is less clear. I want to be, having a salary and a free lunch and a bonus, and a training program, it's clear and it's a well-worn path. And entrepreneurship is not, it's uncertain. And it's going to feel that way. Like that's normal. And get out of your mind that there's not going to be this day where the clouds part and this ray of sun comes down to you and says, Graham, it's no, like that's just not how it feels. It's going to feel scary and it's going to feel early and it's going to feel unclear and uncertain. And you're going to just have to have some faith. So beware of the two most dangerous words. Not now. If you want to be a world-class entrepreneur, do the thing that turns you on, lengthen your time frame, and beware of the two most dangerous words. I used to think that I would have two careers, that I would start off and I'd be in the for-profit sector, and I would go do all this great stuff, and then I would go actually contribute to the world, and I'd start a nonprofit or do some social work or something like that. But I've come to change my mind and my thought on this. So Gallup recently did a poll where 70% of people in the United States dislike or actively dislike their jobs. And I have a close friend of mine, Kristen, who falls in that category. So imagine, Kristen goes to work and she hates her job and she's spending half her waking hours there. She doesn't feel valued. She doesn't work with people necessarily she likes and admires. She doesn't respect her boss. She's doing something she's not proud of or excited about. And she's working because she has to work. 70% of the people are like that. Well, think about what it's like to be Kristen's daughter, or Kristen's son, or Kristen's partner, or sister, or mother. So it's not just affecting her, it's affecting her whole community. And conversely, imagine you can change that as a leader, and you can. And now imagine Kristen comes home and she feels empowered at work, and she realizes what she does matters, and her work has meaning, and she's connecting it to the vision of the company or something, a larger purpose that she can relate to. And she works with people she likes and trusts and admires, and she feels like she matters. And now what's it like to be in her community? What's it like to be her son or her daughter or her friend or her sister? So great leadership changes lives. It changes lives. And all of you have the opportunity to do that and to be part of that force now in the for-profit world. If you think of yourself that way, and if you think of yourself as leaders, and I made that change 24 years ago from being this kind of mathematical investor to actually being a leader. You will get kicked in the teeth on the journey, but you will be able to change lives. So in summary, the 3 points again: do something that turns you on. Life has suffering, so figure out something that's worth suffering for. And when you're turned on, you will tap into superpowers that you didn't even know that you had. Number 2 is expand your time frame. You will spend very, very little of your life in the outcome of anything. You'll spend a fraction of a second in the outcome. You're going to spend your whole life in this pursuit and the journey. So give yourself something that you have a lifelong love affair with in this one precious life of yours. And finally, beware of the 2 most dangerous words, not now. It will always, always feel too early. It will always feel risky. It'll always feel like the right time. You'll feel like an imposter. You'll feel like it's not, you need more experience or whatever, and you don't. You just need to realize not now is fear in another form. I have good news and bad news about starting. The bad news is that no one else can give you permission to do this. There's no consultant, there's no parent or coach who can give you, ultimately you're the only one who can give you that permission. But the good news is that's the only permission that you really need. So give yourself permission to do the thing you want to do with this one life of yours. Extend your time frame and do it now. You did not come this far to play small. You came this far to have a dent in the universe. So begin it now, and good luck. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you.
Would you like to sit?
Yeah, sure.
Feel free. So, Graham, we didn't start inspirational, but we certainly landed inspirational. That was fantastic. That was great. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Thank you for having me.
The booth in Kellogg Communities and a record attendance this year for our 10th annual. It's such an honor and a privilege to have you here with us.
It was an honor to be invited, and I'm super happy to be here. Thank you, Brian.
So, Graham, where I want to start, and then in a few minutes we'll open it up for Q&A from this record audience. I want to start with a little bit of zooming in on this second concept of lengthening one's timeline. In my experience, anything that takes a long time, if it's a marathon, not a sprint, personal habits really matter, and the effect of one's personal habits compound over time, they stack on themselves. What advice would you give this group of mainly folks that are evaluating whether or not this is the right path, ETA is the right path for them? What advice would you give them? What have you seen work? What have you seen not work as it relates to personal habits that have a tendency to compound over time?
Yeah, great question. I'm gonna say this in two different categories. The first category is kind of what you're thinking I'm gonna talk about, personal habits, and the second one is gonna be more about personal habits as relates to work. But you know, the mind follows the body, and so I think the first part of personal habits is, you know, to take care of your body. And I know it sounds really cliche, but you know, the formula for returns is 1 + r to the n. And n is the number of years you do something, and n is a quadratic. So like if you look at the actual returns for just about any business, or for my life, it gets logarithmic as you increase the n. And to increase the n, you just have to take care of yourself, and you know, you make better decisions when you're energetic. You show up differently. You will make different decisions. You will make the decision to keep going. You'll make the decisions to think bigger. And burnout is usually physical. Depression is usually starts with physical, and I don't mean to take away from people that have real issues, but like it really starts physical. So I mean, for me, I am crazy intense about those things. So I mean, my habits are, you know, I don't drink alcohol, I don't drink caffeine, I don't eat gluten, I sleep 8 or 9 hours a night, I work out every day, cold plunge, meditate, talk to a coach. I mean, it's like, let's just start there, and good things happen when you take care of your body. Your mind is free to be a lot more aggressive. So I've dialed those things up over the years, because every time I do it, I notice a difference in the way that I show up, and a difference in my energy. And what I said probably sounds pretty extreme to some people here. So you don't have to necessarily do all that, but definitely everything you're doing is affecting, you know, your ability to stay in this race for a long time. The second category, I would say, is probably the thing that I think has probably differentiated me more than anything else. And that is, I'll describe what the sort of average is. So, and I'll use myself as an example. Like a bad day for me would look like this. You know, I didn't get a good night's sleep. I wake up, I'm exhausted. I commute to work, I fight traffic. I'm kind of flustered. Someone cuts me off on the way to work. I show up, you know, I'm late to a meeting. I'm kind of present in the meeting, but sort of frazzled. Meeting. Maybe a little bit of time for lunch. I'm returning emails, Zoom call, you know, emails, fight the traffic home, have a conference call on the way home, you know, then get home, have a quick dinner with the family, get back online and return emails. You know, that's kind of the default day. Okay, absent intention, that's going to be your day, and you're going to put together
full of quick dopamine hits.
Yeah,
along the way.
Exactly,
right?
It's quick dopamine hits, and brainless, really. I mean, requiring you not to think. Thinking's hard. People hate to do it. So that's like your default day. The problem with that day is you're going to do today what you did yesterday, and you're going to do tomorrow what you did today, by definition, because you're not doing anything to change that. The opposite of that is, and this is hard to do, okay? But if you really want to differentiate yourself and have a real superpower, like the opposite of that would look like this. Like get up at 5:30 to 7:30, you're doing deep work with all cell phones, you know, Wi-Fi, everything off. That's when I'm writing blogs, writing lectures, writing speeches, thinking, planning my days, making my one-page plans, doing the deep work. I can get more done in 2 hours in that way, and those hours with no interruptions, than I can in 15 hours of distraction. But imagine stringing together that 5 days a week. You'll have tremendous amount of productivity. The other part is I put on my calendar probably a total of 3 hours a week where I'm talking to a coach, and we're like creating a vision, and then we're mapping that vision into 5-year goals, 1-year goals, quarterly goals, and then we're putting those on the calendar. So rather than my calendar being at the whim of like whoever's scheduling stuff, my calendar is the stuff I want to move forward on, the priorities I want to move forward on. And so you asked a question about personal habits. Like, we all have plenty of time in the day to get stuff done. I promise you. You're just using it poorly. And an algorithm most people have to put something on their calendar, someone says, hey, Graham, can you join this meeting from 2:30 to 3:30? And you know what most people do? They look at their calendar and they're like, oh, I don't have anything. Yes. That's the algorithm. How many of you have some algorithm that looks like that, right? That's a horrible algorithm. That's like the worst algorithm ever. You know, and your answer should be no to basically every meeting unless it's like moving you toward, your 5-year goals.
So let's talk about 5-year goals. I mean, again, playing with this, it's a marathon, not a sprint. My guess is that you hear from your students often about they want to focus on doing a search, making an acquisition, leading that business, and then having an exit. And that's sort of like, if I can pull that off, that's great. And then it's sort of made. But what would you say to the current and past students that are in the room around extending the horizon with which you think about this? Like, what are the metrics? Maybe I'll go there. What are the metrics that you would think about and encourage this group to think about? Are they truly just economic, or are there other ones that we should think about as a group in measuring the ultimate scoreboard in ETA, and over what period of time should we measure that set of metrics?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a couple different ways to think about that. The first one is like, maybe let's say you're 0 to 4 years out of school, and just overall, what should your goals be? And I think there's a pretty clear answer to that, which is, someone told me this advice, and it's been the best advice I ever got, which is, your goal should be to make yourself the most formidable leader human possible. And you should do whatever you can to move you in that direction. For me, like, that was finding the people that I admired that had already done the thing I wanted to do and learning as much as I could from them. So, like, if I had to give advice, like, the first 5+ years out of school, maybe even 10, if you just focus on yourself and making yourself the most formidable person, everything in your life will take care of itself, I promise you. Which is the opposite of like optimizing your 1-year earnings. It's like, no, I want to optimize my 5-year development as a person. In terms of the question on ETA, I mean, that could be an entire conference on like, when to sell a business. And I have some very strong views on this, which is what I was kind of saying before, which is the returns are 1 + r to the n, and n is quadratic. And most people do all the heavy lifting and all the hard work, and they have the mission, and they go through all the process, and they get the business where it's exciting, and then they sell. It's like the dumbest, most value-destroying thing you could do. Like, it's like, and the reason that you sell when you're at that time is 2 things. One is, you're so close to the business that you see all the warts. You see all the bad things, and you're nervous because you're in it. And so you see you deal with all the problems, all the stuff I was talking about before. And so you have this kind of skewed view that it's a lot worse than it is because you're so close to it. And then the second reason people sell too early is liquidity. Like, hey, I'm 5 years out of school. I have 110% of my net worth in this one thing. But guess what? You can solve liquidity without selling the company. There's 30 different ways selling a company it's like playing the piano with boxing gloves on. Like, it's a very blunt object to get liquidity. It's a horrible idea in most cases. You're better off working with your investors to find out a way to get liquidity, reset your options, take some money off, whatever, and keep going, because the thing that you're working on is probably the path to you having more success than selling that and starting over with something else. You just don't know the warts of the something else yet, and you know the warts of the thing you have. But we've made more money in year 8 and 9 in one business than we made in years 1 through 5 in 30 other businesses combined. So it just gets logarithmic, and you got to give it that air to get there. which no one does.
I think that one of the cool things about the ETA community that we've seen develop over the years, 10 years into this conference, crazy to think about that, but there are now more and very talented investors, advisors, mentors that can help you as an entrepreneur, because they're not as close to the day-to-day and the warts and sort of, so that community has really developed and rallied around these entrepreneurs. And I think that the model has evolved such that there are very available mechanisms to do what you're saying, create liquidity in a way that maybe 10, 20 years ago weren't as often used.
There's a real downside of this community too that I just want to say, and
we were supposed to be inspirational.
There is a real downside. I mean, if you go way back when search funds first started, I mean, the investors were Joel Peterson and Irv Grousbeck and Bill Egan, and there were like 6 people that invested in all the first search funds. And what those 6 people had in common is they had no need for liquidity at all. And so they cut their weeds and water their flowers. That's what they did. I mean, Irv's still an investor in Shurian 27 years later, which has turned out a pretty good hold. Search fund investors that have to raise money from external sources can be sources of pressure to sell. And why is that? I can tell you why, because I have the same pressure as running a private equity firm, which is I have to go raise money for my next fund. Well, what do my investors? They want to see liquidity. Well, what can I sell? When I need liquidity, I'm going to sell my best companies, which is, again, the dumbest possible thing you can do. So there is a real downside to the funds in search fund world. And so I'm not saying that because I'm an investor in some of the funds. I love the people who run the funds, but I just want to put that on the table so everyone's talking about that dynamic openly, which is whether they are doing it intentionally or not, there is pressure from them to sell their best companies to show investors returns. And once again, I would say selling the business is a super blunt instrument, and there's 30 other ways that they should solve that.
Last question, then I want to open it up. I'm sure we've got a whole bunch of questions from the group that we'll try to field as many as we can. Not now. We hear from students all the time. Probably Mark and I get this question all the time. When will I be ready? When will I know that I'm ready to go and do a search and be a CEO? How will I know? And it gets to this, sort of not now third principle of yours. What would you say to those folks? And how would you encourage them to get to the bottom of that underlying fear, really, where that question comes from?
It's a great question. I mean, my flippant answer of when you're going to be ready is never, That's like my flippant answer, and it actually is the answer. You're never going to feel like you're ready. I mean, we just raised a new fund, and I don't feel like we're ready to raise that. Like I have all the insecurities and limiting beliefs and panic and sleepless nights, and so I think you're never going to feel ready. So just as long as you realize that time's never going to come. One thing that I think is really helpful to do, though, is write down your fears. So what am I afraid of? Here's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid that I might not buy the right business. I'm afraid that I might not be able to pay my bills. I'm afraid that I might get to the 2 years and not have a company. I'm afraid that I buy the company and I don't know how to run it. So write down, be very specific with what it is that you're afraid of. The reason to do that is you're getting these fears out of your subconscious mind, where they can be really hurtful and harmful, and they can keep you from taking action. But the most insidious thing is a lot of times you don't even realize that they're there. So you may be like, gosh, I'm going to just take this safe job. But what you don't realize is the thing that you're worried about is that you're not going to be able to raise the money, or that you're not going to be able to find the company. When you write them down, all of a sudden they become just to-do items. How would I learn how to buy a business? How would I learn how to finance my company? How would I meet investors? How would I partner with people that would help me find a good company? those are all stuff you've all spent your whole lives solving, right? Those are just problems that you've spent, 30 years becoming great at solving, as opposed to being these like nebulous fears. So that's an exercise that I find, I still do that right now, and it's unbelievable. It's a coaching term for it is writing down your limiting beliefs.
Yeah, I've found that when I have trouble sleeping, to have a journal by your bedside, just to get it out there.
Yeah, your fears are the scariest when they're in your recesses of your mind, and they're the least scary when they're just you're looking at them with your conscious mind on paper.
I believe we have 4 mics strategically placed throughout the room. So if you have a question, just raise your hand, and a mic will hopefully find you. I can't see everybody, so I'll trust the mic runners to select.
Hey.
Hey.
I'm sure you have hundreds of deals and offers and ventures and companies crossing your desk on a daily basis. Are there certain attributes about those deals, a level of maturity, that when they come across your desk gets you to bite? Or is it a matter of understanding the people behind that business that gets you that follow-up?
Yeah, good question. I'm gonna answer your question. I'm going to answer it a little bit differently, but what you asked, which is like, here's how I answer it. I'm a search funder, and what am I going to buy, and how do I know, and what should I be looking for? So, number one, 2, 3, and 4 you should be looking for is quality of revenue in the business. Quality of revenue. That's like, you could almost just stop there. Quality of revenue. There's a number of things that go underneath that. Is the revenue recurring? Is it reoccurring? Is it highly predictable? Are the products and services mission critical, so they're going to do well in a recession? How high are the switching costs, where someone could take your business away? Those are all things underneath that. Revenue retention. Attrition, customer attrition, those are all under revenue quality. But that's really that's what you're looking for in a company. The second thing that's kind of a close cousin to that I like to think about is what are the variables endogenous or exogenous? Endogenous in my control, exogenous not in my control. And it's why I don't do venture capital, because like the best venture capitalists in the world, they get it right 1 out of 10 times. Product market fit, I still think, is kind of exogenous, or at least it's something I don't know how to do. Building a sales team is endogenous. Hiring well is endogenous. Creating the right pricing structure, add-on acquisitions, all endogenous variables. So I want my career to be won or lost on things in my control, not some exogenous. So things that you see sometimes that are on that list, Medicare reimbursement, like, searcher comes and says, gosh, Medicare cut and whatever, and we're screwed. It's like, yeah, you kind of knew that before you bought the business, you do, right? That's not in your control. So I would just, that would be, if I had to just give you 2, those would be the 2 things I would focus on.
See a hand right there. Yeah, we'll go to you next.
I love to focus on people and how that should be at the center of any business. Do you feel like you have a methodology or approach to assessing like talent and fit for talent that gives you a competitive advantage? And has that been boiled down to like, this is our process and these are the steps?
Yeah, good question. So the question, if you couldn't hear, was people and talent and how do we assess it, and the importance of it. So I'll do really quickly tell this quick story. So in 2008, the world's falling apart. I had my first ever executive coach. We had a call every Tuesday, and I kept trying to cancel this one call, and we get on the phone. He's like, what's stressing you out? I'm like, oh my God, I got to fly to Dallas and fix this, and Houston and fix this. Then I got to go to Chicago and this, and I'm doing all these diving saves. And long story short, we do this thing in coaching called the root cause analysis. Why? The bottom of every single problem was the wrong person. had the wrong CEO here, the wrong VP at Alpine here, the wrong CFO here. So it was every single route was a problem. And that's when I just changed and I said, like, okay, I am in the talent business. That's really the business that I'm in. And I think all of us ultimately are in the talent business. That's the true business, no matter where you go into. So if you're a searcher and you're buying a business, your first 3 hires are your co-founders. You should treat them as such. How would you hire a co-founder? Would you just meet 3 people and the one that's the best of those 3 who's willing to move to Chicago is the one you should pick? No. You would have a much more extensive process because, A's hire A's and B's hire C's. So if I hire a B VP of sales, the entire stack underneath that is going to be B's and C's. If I hire a B CFO, I'm going to have B's and C's. Conversely, A's hire A's. So you're going to compound greatness in those first 3 key hires that you make. So treat it with that kind of intensity. In terms of your question, 2 more things I'd say. In terms of your question on, how do you know? Again, that could be a 6-hour process. I would say we use the methodology called top grading, which is in the book Who by G.H. Smart. So I won't go through all that because I think they'll explain it better than I would. But the thing that people miss about hiring, there was this great meme that was on social media that said, okay, here's what I want you to do. Make a list of all the characteristics. If you're looking to get married, okay, make a list of all the characteristics that you want in your spouse, and then be that list. And I was like, that's freaking awesome advice. And it's kind of the same thing with hiring. It's like your first job is to make yourself and your company and the role that you're hiring for the role that the A+ player would take. Okay? That's your first part, is like, you're gonna meet this A+ person that's amazing. Are you the role that they should take in this part of their career? And it took me a while to figure that out. And once I figured that out, we've been able to attract just about anyone we want for just about any role we want. So make yourself the business where they should want to go work. And there's a lot of stuff that goes into that: empowerment, equity. They have to work with other great players. They have to have clear definition of role, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you. Top 3 leadership folks that you look to for leadership wisdom.
That's a hard question. I think of a good book as like there's one concept in there that is like been with me for 25 years. So I'll give you the concepts and the books that came with them. Number 1, Good to Great by Jim Collins. The concept was get the right people on the bus and the wrong people off the bus. There's a lot of other great stuff. All his books are great. Number 2 is the book Switch by Dan and Chip Heath. There's a lot of amazing things in that, but the number 1 thing that I took from that was Scale Your Bright Spots. 95% of all the intelligent strategic decisions we've made have come from this one question: what's working and how do we do more of that? It sounds so simple, but everyone looks at their problems, they try to fix stuff. All your money is going to be made by scaling your bright spots. That came from that book, and that's been life-changing. Number 3 would probably just be like the Warren Buffett letters, because he just does such a good job of like describing the difference between a good business and a bad business. People always think that Buffett's outdated. He's not. It's the same stuff. 100 years from now, it's going to be the same stuff.
Another big believer in revenue quality.
Yeah, exactly. That's all he does is revenue quality. That's all he focuses. And so that stuff's never going to get outdated. Whether it's crypto or .coms, it's still the same stuff.
Hopefully we have this mic working now.
Try that again.
There we go.
Really similar question to the one 2 questions ago. You talked about 500 entrepreneurs that you've helped cash out, and you talked about those employees who you had to lay off in your first acquisition and just kind of hung their head. Have you had experiences where you found in those businesses that you bought people that could become those A players but never had the chance before? How have you found or worked with those to bring up instead of firing?
All the time. We find this all the time. It's one of the reasons that I love my job is we go in and measure employee net promoter score and employee engagement the day that we buy the business, okay? And then we measure it every quarter after, and we hold our CEOs accountable to that. And we have a whole program to engage employees. And the simple way to describe the program is, and I'm not doing it justice, but let's say that I'm the CEO and I walk into a new business. I'm going to work with a coach and I'm going to get clear on, quote, my vision. By the way, I'm going to do a 90-day tour. I'm going to ask employees. I'm going to sit down with them. So actually, I'll back up. So I took over a business. I go to all the locations. I'm sitting down with people. What's going well? What else? What's not going well? What else? If you were me, what would you do? Where are our priorities? What's going, where are we wasting time, et cetera? And the number one thing that I always get people to say is, I've worked at this company 15 years and no one's ever asked me my opinion before. Just listen, just listen. I mean, listen not because you're pretending like you're listening, but listen like because you care, because my coach always says, the answer is always in the room. The people that are there, they know exactly, you don't have, if you go and hire McKinsey, no offense to McKinsey, you know what they're gonna do? They're gonna go interview your employees and your customers, and they're gonna take that information and sell it back to you. It's like, well, why don't you just do that? The other benefit of, it's true.
But in a really nice deck.
It's true, yeah. I mean, and by the way, the people in this room are the people doing that anyway. So, it's like, so just do that, and you have the other benefit that if it's you doing it, you're building trust with those people while you're asking those questions. They're like, Graham actually cares what I have to say, because I do. Then you form a plan which has been our plan. It's not Graham's plan, it's the entire company's plan. And then you roll that out in concentric circles. So first it's me with my coach, then it's me with the senior executive team, then the executive management team, and eventually, and each time you're getting input from everybody and you're tweaking it a little, not because you are trying to do that to show that you're doing it, but because you actually want people's input. By the time you end up with a plan, it's our plan. That's a simple analysis, but 1,000% most employees have never been given a chance. Most employees don't know what is expected of them. They're doing that day that I told you about commuting to work. That's what 99% of the workforce looks like.
And it's so fun to see those folks emerge.
It's incredible.
It's incredible. We've got time for probably 2 more questions. I see a hand up right here. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah,
go
sure.
ahead.
I wish you could speak very briefly about the current macro environment and how is that changing the focus of the funds that you have been raising.
Yeah. Well, I don't think people really realize what's really like the long-term impact of high interest rates. We haven't seen it. We haven't even started to see it. Like we're in the very early innings. I mean, big picture. All of us here in this room are in the business of private equity in some form. Allocations to private equity have been increasing over the last 25 years since I've been in the business. That's because interest rates have been going down, and so the alternatives are really bad. Right now, if you're a pension fund, you can get 12% unlevered returns on senior secured debt in great companies with like 25% loan to value. I mean, that's money good. Like, why do you need private equity? You don't. So long term, there's gonna be, if interest rates stay high, there's gonna be massive implications on and it'll take years, the allocations take a long time, but if interest rates stay up, that's ultimately what's gonna happen. All the trends that we've seen over the last 25 years are gonna go the other way, which is pretty dramatic. Like, I mean, we were buying plumbing and HVAC businesses 10 years ago for 6 times EBITDA. Those same businesses are now trading for 18 times EBITDA, and they're the exact same companies. Nothing has changed. How does it go from 6 to 18? Supply and demand. There's way more money in the system. That money's going to be out of the system over time. So long term, if they stay high, it's pretty dramatic. In terms of what's going on right now, I mean, the obvious thing is debt's a lot more expensive, and therefore leverage levels will come down. Therefore, you should be paying lower prices for businesses. And if you're not, then you probably don't want to do the deals until you can kind of see a little bit of an offset for price, which it takes a little bit of time for the supply and demand to match up. And they're getting there. It's getting there now. There's more stuff for sale, but look in a 5.5% SOFR environment, a business is worth less than it was in a 0% SOFR environment. So there's a lot less things trading hands because there's just not a match yet of expectations and price.
Hi, sorry, I'm Billy from Indonesia. So what you shared earlier, there are 30 different ways to make money besides selling your companies. That is what a lot of the family businesses in Asia has been doing. Like if you ask your grandfather, they will tell me that, no, the business is forever. It's for legacy. It's for my children, for my grandchildren. They never think about selling. But right now, if you come to Southeast Asia, everyone is thinking about selling their business to PE funds. And now we're talking about ETAs. Like a lot of the ideas I got was that we have access to PE firms right now. So we just talk to PE firms of what they're looking for. So that's why we built our search funds in search of exit to them. Like that's what I see. It's quite refreshing to hear from you that that is not the right way. So yeah, I would like to see like, besides dividends, what else are you looking at when you acquire a firm that you are planning to hold for, I think, 50 years, 60 years? Is that what you're looking at? Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for the question. You know, there's a new financial innovation that we've been using called continuation vehicles, where we just did one last week. I think it was the largest ever. We sold our plumbing and HVAC business. Basically, we set up a new vehicle, a new set of investors, and sold it to that, and cashed out the fund it's in, and kind of reset the clock for another period of time for the reasons I just said, which is like you go all through all the trouble to build this incredible company. The most value-destroying thing you could do is sell it. And so that is one example of a new innovation that you can use. The other one would be, you know, if you have 20% investor who's trying to raise a new fund and they want to get out, like you don't have to sell the company, you know. And gosh, I'll be on, you know, talk to a searcher and they say, oh, you know, I talked to Raymond James and, you know, I talked to the investment banker. They're like, now is a perfect time. You got to sell because, you know, there's these strategics and they're going to pay another extra multiple point. I'm like, who gives a shit? Like, you're going to hold this business 5 years. Like, that extra multiple point is irrelevant, you know? And if you go and ask the barber, they're going to tell you need a haircut. If you talk to an investment banker, they're going to tell you right now is the perfect time to sell. I don't care what the timing is or the industry or it's always the right time to sell. And if you start to engage the board on the conversation, again, I hate to say it, but you know, the board they got to fundraise, like nothing gets them more jazzed up than liquidity. So they're going to also tell you it's time to sell. And you're young, and you're like, these are your advisors, and these are people that you're looking to for answers, and they're all going to give you the exact wrong advice. I'm sorry, but it's true.
Graham, I should have mentioned we have a lot of investment bankers in the room.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, if I was an investment banker, I'm sure I would be saying the same thing because you know that's the business that they're in, but it's not in your interest.
Focusing on revenue quality and businesses that are enduringly profitable is a winning strategy, and if you can own those businesses for a long time, it tends to work out. I think we've got time for one more question. If there's anyone out there, I see one right there.
Hi, Graham. So my question is, when did you feel like you made it? As in, for me, I'm sometimes struggling with who I am, in a sense that I don't compliment my achievements. So when did you feel like you made it? Was it at Alpine or when you do rowing?
Or is it today?
You have no idea how good of a question that is. That's a pretty deep question. I'll give you the sort of shallow answer, and then I'll try to give you the deep answer. The shallow answer, like, if you just look at Alpine, we started in the current form of the normal fund in 2001. We lost money on our first fund, so that would not be making it. Then the next two funds were good, but not great, kind of top quartile, but not like something to write home about. Then we got flattened with the Great Recession. So we had 5 years where we didn't raise a fund, and I drained my savings account to make payroll. So I wouldn't say we made it then. And then we started kind of clawing back, and And then really we did the real work. The real work started after the recession. That's when I hired a coach. That's when I decided we were going to be the #1 performing fund in the world. That's when we really started doing the work. And I guess I had to wait 10 years to realize, that I needed help and that I was going to really focus on myself as a leader and a CEO. Then what happened is we started doing the work, and we started doing really, really, really good work, but it didn't show up in our results because of the things I mentioned before, which is we cut our weeds and watered our flowers. So our exits were like all the crap, and then we were compounding our winners. So really the answer was like between 2018 and 2021, we started selling stuff because the software market was crazy, and we started selling our businesses. And so two things happened. One is we took stuff from unrealized to realized. Investors didn't really give us credit for the unrealized. But the bigger thing that happened is we literally doubled the enterprise value when we sold the businesses. So we were holding them way too low. So all of a sudden in 3 years, we went from being decent to literally being the #1 performing private equity fund in the world. We've put up 4 5X funds in a row. By the way, we'll have to edit that out because I'm not allowed to say that for SEC reasons. So, so the answer to when we made it was, say, 2021. Okay, I started the company in 2001, so 20 years. And by the way, that wasn't when I started private equity. I started 10 years before that. So pretty much almost 30 years in the business when we made it by conventional standards. Now I'll give you that's the shallow answer. The deep answer is the most depressing thing that can happen to you is you hit your goals. Because you realize that there's nothing there. Like what's there at the end of your goals is you. It's still you. So whatever problems or things you're running away from or issues you have or things you thought would change when you become this great thing, that's still up to you. So, that's really, it's been kind of a weird journey when I just had my head down for so long, for 29 years, to do the journey that I just described to you, and it took every ounce of everything that I had. And then getting there wasn't what I thought, I mean, I'm really proud of our firm and I'm proud of how I've grown, but it's, that's what I said in my talk earlier, like, you got to enjoy the process. You just got, because there's really, I hate to say this, but there's no end. It's not like you get this award and all of a sudden everything's great. So, you're going to live your entire life in the journey of this, and so just make sure that's something that you're excited to be on. Probably the way I would answer the deep part of that.
I can't think of a better way to wrap up our session. Graham, you've given us all so much to bring into the rest of our day and think about and consider as we're hearing from people in and around the ETA community. On behalf of Booth and Kellogg and the entire community here, I can't thank you enough.
Thank you, brother.